Position one is we have to fight climate change. Position number two is climate change is a hoax. And then the new third position is it's worse than you think. And we need to take dramatic action, not just to reduce the bad, but also try and increase the good. So I am the opposite of the person that thinks we should write off people in Guam or Puerto Rico. We have to do much, much more and own up to the fact that our climate is changing irreversibly and that sea level rise is unfortunately going to be with us even if the United States were to dramatically change its ways. The United States only accounts for 15% of global emissions. So even if we were somehow to go miraculously to zero in 12 years, the Earth would likely still continue to warm. So I just came out with a 5-point plan that includes moving towards renewable sources of energy, exporting those technologies to other parts of the world, because right now Africa is taking power plants from China that burn coal. And they're excited about it because they just need energy. They don't really care about what's going on in terms of climate change. So we need to try and change their incentives. We need to reverse some of the damage we're doing by reforesting tracts of land, by trying to reseed parts of the ocean with plankton and other things that will resuscitate those ecosystems. But the fourth big thing, to your point, Viet, is we need to move our people to higher ground, both literally and figuratively, which means investing in the infrastructure of these communities. But in some cases, it may mean, and if you think I'm being overly dramatic, we have already relocated climate refugees in Louisiana that were in a part of the state that became uninhabitable, and then we moved them. So if you think that that's not where we are, we're there now. And we need to be doing more of those things rather than letting our people, frankly, get swept out to sea.
Andrew, you talked about, or you identified yourself kind of with Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, saying they came out of nowhere. There seems to be, and apologies I'm butchering it, but sort of like a model to that. I feel like there's a lot of press talk about the negatives of being an outsider. No one knew who you were. But what are kind of the advantages to it? What are the benefits that you are seeing after being on the campaign trail for so long?
Right now, the number one criteria that Democrats have for the nominee is who can beat Donald Trump. That's one reason why Joe Biden's number one, because people think that he's the most electable. But if you dig into polling of Trump supporters, I am one of only 2 candidates that 10% or more of Trump voters said that they would support, which means if I'm the Democratic nominee, the Democrats will win this election. That's just math. And one of the reasons why I'm getting double-digit support from Trump voters is because I'm not a politician, I'm new, I'm from outside the system. When Donald Trump ran around saying, drain the swamp, there are a lot of Americans who've lost faith in our government, particularly our government in D.C., to solve the problems that they're experiencing in their lives. And so when I'm campaigning in places like New Hampshire and Iowa, a lot of people will say to me, you don't sound like a politician, and I like that. Unfortunately, we're at a point now where it's going to take some combination of politicians and non-politicians to solve the problems.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like your presence, if we go back to the hypothetical situation, President Yang, I feel like you can't help but talk about your role in talking about race. I feel like your presence itself, there has to be some things that are addressed with the relationship with Asia, etc. How do you plan to kind of address those changes, because much has already been changed?
Well, we joke around the office what Donald Trump's nickname for me will be. And
we were just talking about that, too. What might that be?
We've come up with Comrade Yang.
Comrade Yang.
It's a little racist, little socialist. But I think that under my administration, right now the rest of the world is looking at us being like, what the heck is going on in the United States of America? And the opposite of Donald Trump, in many respects, is an Asian man who likes math. So after I win in 2020, can you imagine the rest of the world? They'd be like, wow, they turned that around really quickly. And after my victory, the celebrations will extend beyond the United States of America. There are going to be many happy people in other parts of the world too. And I think at that point we can actually start rebuilding globally our global relationships.
Well, give us one example of that. Obviously, President Obama got a lot of flack from a certain corner of this country for supposedly not being American. I don't think this country has changed so much that if you become president, you're going to face any kind of a different situation. Some people out there will question who you are, what your allegiances are, and so on. And of course, questions of China, Taiwan are going to be still important as they are today. How are you going to confront that situation, both in terms of some people's perceptions of you, but also confronting or dealing with China and Taiwan?
Well, that's one of the joys of this campaign, and it gave me a lot of pride to know that millions of Americans they're going to turn on ABC this Thursday, see me on the debate stage in Houston. And I like to believe that just having someone who looks like me on that stage is going to help transform what they think of as Asian Americans' place in this country. And that's something that made me very happy. It's going to make me even happier after I win.
And him. You're going to make him very happy.
But the fact that I'm laser focused on solving the problems that the American people see in their communities. When I campaign in Iowa or New Hampshire, frankly, places that don't have that many Asian Americans, the reaction that I'm getting is generally very positive, even based upon my own identity. Because I do a lot of talking about numbers and technology, and then people are like, well, seems like he knows what he's talking about.
That always works. Throw out a number, right? I've done it as well.
Fake it till you make it.
They get all dizzy. Since we are talking about race, and we saw one of the contenders not do so well, at least in appearance, and it's a mayor of a very moderate town, shall we say, South Bend, Indiana. And Pete Buttigieg did not handle the situation with law enforcement as well as the African American community. So I'm very interested, Andrew, what would your first speech be on race, and how would you address the issue of seeing African Americans, one group of Americans that at a rate of incarceration, and we're talking about criminal justice here, there seems to be, at least by the data, a problem, yet an opportunity to fix something?
Well, what I speak to African American groups fairly frequently on the campaign, and what I tell them is, I say flat out, it's like, look, I know what it's like to grow up and not be white in this country, but I have no idea what it's like to grow up and be black in this country, because that's a whole other set of experiences. And what I say to them is, like, I think I know what it's like to have words used against you, but you all have numbers working against you. And in my experience, numbers are much more cruel and harsh. And the numbers are going to get even worse for African Americans in the years to come. A study just came out that said median African American household net worth will be 0 in 2053. And you ask, well, why is it going to go to 0? It's going to go to 0 because if you think about the technologies that are coming online, it's going to get rid of retail workers and truck drivers and clerical workers, and the first people that are going to get pushed out of the workforce are going to be people of color, people with lower levels of education, people with lower levels of capital and resources. And so what I say to black communities, like, look, these inequities are actually not going to get any better. They're just going to get worse. And the only way to make it right for you is to do what Dr. Martin Luther King said in the 60s, which is just to have guaranteed minimum income, which is another name for the freedom dividend, because then you would be able to reconstitute many of their communities and give their kids a much better chance to learn. One reason why we're not making progress in education the way we'd like is that 65 to 70% of school children's academic performance is based upon non-school factors. Things like words read to them when they're young, household income, stress levels in the house, type of neighborhood, all these things that schools can't really control. And so if you're an educator, you feel like you're being held accountable for 100% of kids' performance, and you can only control a third. And, you know, people in our community, I think, frankly, kind of sense this, because, like, our parents are, like, focused on us. I don't know, but, like, the summer, it's like, you don't get summers off. You know, it's, like, time to find something else to learn. And so if we're going to make things right for black people in this country, we're going to have to go much, much deeper, which includes trying to reconstitute the level of resources in the home.
Well, one of the more divisive racial issues that Asian Americans and African Americans are caught up in is affirmative action. Now, the polling data shows that the majority of Asian Americans support affirmative action, but that's not true across the board. For example, Chinese Americans tend to be split on this issue. It's not necessarily an issue that can be addressed, I don't think, purely by universal basic income. So what's your stance on affirmative action? How would you address some of the debates and controversies that are going on around it right now?
I'm pro-affirmative action, and I resent how Asian Americans are often used as a lever. Because if you look at the people who are bringing these lawsuits, it's often conservative groups that, frankly, in my opinion, do not care that much about the Asian American community's interests. They're just trying to do away with policies that they don't like. I think affirmative action is, by and large, a positive thing. Can it be tweaked and modified in some context, in some regards? Yes, but doing away with it would lead to a very, very stratified educational system in many, many environments.
Okay. I'm also a university professor, and on a related.
What do you teach?
What do I teach? I teach English. If you want to go against stereotypes, okay.
Wait, who are you?
Yeah. No, I'll just say, Asian American parents out there, please encourage your children to become English majors. We tell stories. We need stories to change the American landscape. So along with rising healthcare costs, one of the other really expensive parts of American life is higher education.
Yes.
USC, God, I love it, but it's $57,000 a year to go there, $20,000 a year on top of that for expenses. So how do we get that under control? I assume you think this is too expensive. How do we get this?
I have kids, man. Don't worry. I'm looking out for us. Yeah.
What is the problem? How do we get it under control in terms of spiraling higher education costs?
Oh, I go to people, I ask, why did college get 2.5 times more expensive when it did not get 2.5 times better? And there are two main reasons. Number one is that in many contexts, states stopped supporting their university systems to the same degree, as happened with the UC system and others. But the other bigger driver is administrative bloat, where universities have hired 200% more administrators than professors, where at this point you have just layers and layers of bureaucracy. And I've run a national nonprofit, so I get it. When you run a nonprofit organization, you hire more people that are like you. So if you're a nonprofit administrator, you're like, I could hire another administrator. And then you end up, over time, it becomes an effective tax on the American people because you feel like you have no choice but to pay. And then the government comes along and says, what, you need $60,000 a year? We'll give you loans for that. And so you wind up with $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, which is what we're up to now. It's very analogous in many ways to the mortgage bubble. So you have to attack this at every level. You have to try and put more public resources to work. The big thing I would do is I would tie grant funding and even your tax-exempt status to the ratio of administrators to students in universities. And then that would force universities to have to, they would say there's no way we can do this work with fewer administrators than we have. And then you'd say, well, I have a feeling you'll figure it out if your money's at stake. And then they would figure it out. And you would find that in many cases it would have very little impact on the student experience.
Maybe one last thing on higher education.
We got 8 minutes. I want to make sure that Esther gets to go out in the audience with Andrew because there's a couple people out here that probably want to see this guy and talk to him, right? Yeah, one or two. But before you do that, I got to ask this question about gender inequality. How do you fix it? I'm very interested in your thought here. We have a lot of issues right now. We're in Southern California. It's a topic that we've seen throughout the last election and now. Lots of topics. You pick it.
So I come from the entrepreneurship world, and I've seen just how stark the inequities are between men and women in that environment. Where if you're a woman, raise your hands if you're an entrepreneur, period, in this room. Because I'm sure there are many, many entrepreneurs here. So I've seen women entrepreneurs in particular that not only do they have more barriers where in terms of access to capital in their own household before they even go out into the marketplace, but then when they go out into the marketplace, investors, mentors, customers, partners, everything is an uphill climb. Something like 95% of angel investors are men, as one example. And so if you want to try, and Katie Calvoto, who's here, is an awesome role model. for female entrepreneurs, but like we have to do much more to try and make it more possible for women to lead and run their own organizations, and that's something I'm very passionate about, because like I did that work for 7 years, and I saw just how ridiculously stacked against women entrepreneurs the startup world is.
Esther, Andrew, head out to the audience
Yes.
really quickly.
I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions today. We're going to kind of head in and see if any of you guys have a question. If you
Would love that.
don't mind joining me.
Andrew hates this stuff. He hates it.
Also, shout out to my friend Dave Min. Where's Dave Min at?
Oh,
Let's get Dave Min into office.
Okay. So we're actually going to go down. Anyone here want to talk to Andrew today? Okay. Oh. Okay. It is her first presidential election, and she has very vocally said that she would like to meet you. Very briefly, what is your name and where are you from?
My name is Shweta Ashokraj. I am from the Bay Area, but I'm from Chennai, India.
Great. And I'm going to stop you right there and bring you guys
I think
to
you
the
just
light.
coined from.
I've gotten that a lot, actually.
All right.
From white people.
Take it away.
So I'm a sophomore diplomacy and world affairs economics double major at Occidental College here in Pasadena. First, I want to say it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to meet you. I'm going to say that again because it is a privilege to be here. My question is regarding a subject that's really triggering, and I don't want it to be taken lightly. So I hope that this is a space in which I am respected and validated for the experiences I'm about to talk about. And I just want to put a trigger warning out there for survivors. There's no other way to preface this. So just 2 weeks ago, I was raped. I didn't give consent. I refused twice, and I was still raped. I am now 1 in every 6 women that have been raped. I'm a part of the 54% of women aged 18 to 34, voters, by the way, that are victims of sexual assault. This doesn't just happen to women, but trans and LGBTQ members as well. Even last night, an event labeled to provide a safe space for Asian Americans was filled with old men, both Asian and white, drunkenly making passes at me and my friends sitting right here, who are also the same age as me, 19. Mind you, we are barely legal. We are forced to take safety precautions instead of holding these men accountable. I have to protect my drink, make sure my body is covered, go to the bathroom with a buddy, carry a sharp object, and I could go on, but I don't want to waste your time either. But you know what? I know I'm beautiful, I know I'm smart, and I want to look good, and I should be comfortable and empowered when I do so. And I didn't say that for applause. Like, even my friends are out here, they look amazing. And I shouldn't feel like I need to suppress myself because a man couldn't control his penis. And I really need you to take me seriously because I'm not just your constituent, I hope to be your successor. So my question is, what are you going to do to protect me and the 90% of women and LGBTQ members that experience sexual assault or rape at least once in their lifetime? Thank you.
Can I touch you? Can I touch you? Can I give you a hug? Oh,
Thank
I'm so
you.
sorry.
It's okay. It happens.
I'm so
But
sorry.
it's not normal.
Oh, it's
It shouldn't be normalized.
There are people in my life who've had similar experiences. That's true of all of us, whether we know it or not. I mean, it's a scourge that pervades our society. And there are things that we can do. The deeper you go, the more ugly the reality gets. So one rule that I'm going to be championing is, this is, like, I want to talk about the rules, because this is what, if you ask a politician this question, then I'll say, here are the rules, and then here are the rules that we can do better. And I have a whole set of rules that we need to have that do better. But then, to me, there's like the stuff that just goes on in people's hearts and souls and minds. And that, to me, is the more important, in a way. So I have a whole set of rules I can talk about, like institutions that cover up sexual assault and sexual predators, like have that, like the rules around that. Right now, many institutions have an incentive where if someone in their midst is a sexual offender of some way, then they get concerned about their liabilities and they brush it under the rug, and then they just try and keep it quiet. And what that does, there are other people that in all likelihood have been impacted by that offender that might think they're the only one, or that like they're blaming themselves in some way, and that in rare cases an institution will actually come forward and say, hey, this person is now like a convicted sexual offender, and so, you know, if there is someone else who had this experience, let us know. But most institutions do not do that because they don't want to obviously go near that. So I'm championing a rule that says, look, if you employ a convicted sexual offender, you have to actually publicize to like the world and also the people that have interacted with that person that this person's now. Yeah, and it happens at USC, so that because what happens in many cases is that the offenders are part of institutions that end up de facto protecting them because they think that's in their interests, and so you have to make it so it's not in their interest to protect. So that's a rule that I'm championing. The non-rule stuff is to me as or more important, where to me strong men treat women well, weak men do not. And so the fundamental question in this context is, how do you make boys and men stronger so that when they see a beautiful woman, they know that they can express their interest in a way that's non-oppressive, but it can do, and then if they get rejected, then they can actually take that in the right way. That to me is like a challenge that needs to be undertaken. But this country right now is essentially experiencing this kind of struggle of masculinity on multiple dimensions. What we're all concerned about the mass shootings, we all know 98% plus of the shooters are boys and men. And so you have, and yeah, most of them, well, most of them are white.
Yes, thank you.
And so we're seeing that this larger set of issues to me is actually one of the great crises in American life right now. And it's playing out in our politics, where one of the reasons why I'm running for president right now is that you see this population that's struggling to come to terms with what the future holds. And right now it's turning around and blaming various scapegoats like immigrants and the minorities.
Brown women, LGBTQ.
Yes.
You gotta say it like it is.
That what we have to do is we have to turn the spotlight on things that we can actually address collectively. And one of the things that is driving it is this mindset of scarcity that is sweeping many, many communities. And that's what, to me, like, you all may know me as like the person who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. A lot of that's about reducing stress, improving mental health, improving education levels, decreasing domestic violence, decreasing hospital visits. And then we can start to address the crisis of masculinity that then touches the issues that you so bravely brought up today and some of the other fundamental issues in our society. But I just want to thank you for sharing your experience with us. And please know that you have a friend and ally in me, because I know how...
I'd like to speak more on this because it's something like I'm genuinely passionate about.
And I know you will. I know you will. Do amazing things. She is going to be my successor. We can all feel it.
I can't.
Okay.
I wasn't born here.
Thank you.
You can become governor of California.
There we go, Governor of California. It is obvious that there's a lot of deep-rooted issues with this, but we do want to give Andrew some time to address you guys and give a statement. So if you'll join me back on stage.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to address you. I'm running for president to try and solve, to me, the problems that are tearing our country apart. So in 2016, Donald Trump said, we're going to make America great again. And he presented a set of solutions that were not the right ones. What were they? Well, first, what was Hillary Clinton's response to make America great again? America's already great. And that did not work in 2016. So his solutions were, we're going to build a wall, we're going to turn the clock back, we're going to bring the old jobs back. And I've spoken to thousands of Trump supporters around the country. Most of them didn't even really believe that those things were going to happen. Like, if you actually sit with them and say, like, hey, did you think we were going to get the jobs back? They would say, it's like, well, I thought we would, try and do things in that direction, but even if I didn't get my job back, I still respect Trump for calling out the problems. I'm getting Trump voters in part because I'm calling out the same problems, but I have a different set of solutions. Instead of turning the clock back, we have to turn the clock forward. We have to advance our society and evolve in how we think about work and value. I talk sometimes about my wife who's at home with our 2 boys, one of whom has autism. And right now her work is calculated at 0 in the modern economy. The way we beat Donald Trump is by redefining the modern economy to include all sorts of work so that people who are losing their jobs in the middle of the country still feel like they have a place in this country. Now, Asian Americans have a unique opportunity in 2020. Our community, let's face facts, our community does not donate or vote or run for office at the same levels as other groups. And because of that, the danger is that we become an afterthought. But this race is going to be an historic opportunity because California, well, there are a few reasons. One, I'm running for president as the first Asian American man to do so as a Democrat. But two, California moved up its primary voting schedule. How many of you knew that? Your mail-in votes will take place at the same time as Iowa for the first time. Ordinarily, by the time it gets to you all, the nomination's well underway, and you don't feel like you have a crucial voice. This time, thanks to your leaders, California can actually make its presence felt. And this time, Asian American community here in California can become a crucial difference maker in this race. So I say we take advantage of the opportunity that history has provided and show them that we are just as American as everyone else in 2020. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Andrew.
Thanks, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, the program will resume in 10 minutes. The program will resume in 10 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will resume in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Brad Jenkins.
Hello. Hello, hello. How are we feeling? Oh my goodness, has the Yang Gang left the building? That's not very nice. Can we, for folks in the aisles, let's get back in our seats, if that's possible. How are we feeling? Did Yang Gang live up to the billing? That was awesome, right? Thank you for everyone listening and watching on the live stream. And also, thank you for people tweeting at me, because I missed some candidates who are in the audience. Hopefully they didn't leave with Yang Gang. I want to give a shout out to Al Jabbar. Is Al still in the building? Anaheim Unified High School board member is running for office. Godfrey Plata. Is Godfrey in the house? There he is. Give Godfrey a shout. Godfrey knows how to use that Twitter. Those DMs are real. And Paolo Magalis. Where's Paolo? Where's he at? He's in the bathroom. Everyone watching the live stream, go Google these amazing people. Give them a few bucks. How are people feeling about the forum so far? I'm going to come out in the audience, I think. I want to talk to some real people here. This is going to be an experiment. Let's see. You were pointing at me. How are you doing?
I'm feeling awesome.
You're feeling good?
I'm so proud that the AAPI brought a candidate that is on the public and national platform. I'm so sad this hall is not packed with our AAPI community members. I'm wearing my gratitude attitude hat, and I'm hoping to change the tone, the tenor, and the temperament of this nation that has been so generous to so many millions of us, immigrants, refugees, et cetera, et cetera.
I love it. Where are you from? Are you from the area?
I was born in DiLac, Vietnam, grew up outside of Washington, D.C. My home now is Little Saigon, OC, the best.
Yes. Shout out, Little Saigon.
Yes.
And what is this hat? I love this gratitude. Tell us.
It's an attitude of gratitude. Everyone take a look. It was made by a healer artist. I am a physician, a hospice doctor, and I'm on radio, TV, and film. My name is Dr. Mai Phuong Nguyen. I might be on a ballot in the near future.
Give a shout out to the doctor. I also want to find Louisa. Where is Louisa? There she is. Louisa, of course you had to be in the middle of the aisle. No, I'm going to come to you. Here we go. Louisa Blue from SEIU. Shout. Purple. Can I give you a hug? Thank you.
Yes.
Louisa runs the largest union movement in the country. How are you feeling about the API Summit so far?
So far, I think it's been going very well. I am disappointed that the other Democrat candidates are not here, but I understand they're in New Hampshire doing their thing. But I think as the first API presidential debate, I think it's very good. And I call on where is everybody? I call on each and every one of you to make sure that you guys participate, right? Because our votes don't count. We'll never get recognized unless we step up and speak out. So I like it, and I hope they talk more about labor.
Me too.
Right? On income inequality, right? Because with Andrew's remarks where he talked about income equality and how to address that, corporate America is taking advantage of workers, right? And so if the McDonald's CEO, Stephen Estabrook, makes millions and millions of dollars, right? Last year it was 15.9 million. The year before that, 21 million. He averages $10,000 an hour, while the average wage for McDonald's workers is $7.91, and no benefits. So I hope the other candidates address that because we have to do something about that. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Louisa. And how can people support SEIU's efforts? I know you have a lot of campaigns going on.
So right now we are advocating for Fight for 15 because people cannot live on $7.25 an hour. They can't. They can't. So raise that minimum wage, right? And then also in terms of the rights of workers in this country to join a union without harassment, intimidation, getting fired, they need to have a voice at work, and the best way to get that is to join a union, but not get harassed by their employers to prohibit them from joining a union.
Thank you so much, Louisa. I'm looking for some young people. I'm looking for some first-time voters. What do we got here? These people look young. How are you? Are you guys shy? Don't Gen Z love the cameras? That's what I keep reading about. You already voted. When did you vote?
I voted last year.
First time? Whereabouts?
In the Bay Area.
Nice. And have you voted?
No, I'm 15. So
You got some time. You've got some time. Anyone else got some thoughts on the Yang Gang, or are there other candidates people are fired up about? We've got Tom Steyer next. Any Tom Steyer heads? Here we go. Let me see. The Yang Gang really did empty out people. Well, here's what we're going to do. Because I think Tom is en route, or maybe not en route. Oh, okay. Do folks have any questions for me? Excuse me? How far is who coming? Oh, Tom. Tom is downstairs. He's coming right up in the next few minutes. Yeah, sure. I've been doing this since birth, just coming on stage. No, so I used to work in the Obama White House. I worked for Valerie Jarrett. I know, yeah, exactly. That is why I love saying the name Barack Obama. I used to work in the Obama White House, and my job was not being on big stages like this, but at the White House being the front door. So we would do events with organizations, innovators, CEOs, but mostly working people and advocates. So yeah, I got someone else is raising their hand. Oh, here we go. So these are Air Jordans. These are ones. My parents were cheap growing up, so they never let me get Air Jordans. So I'm fulfilling my childhood dream by wearing a suit with Air Jordans and hosting a presidential forum. Hi, Mom. Any other questions or thoughts? When is Tulsi? So we've got Steyer next, presidential candidate Tom Steyer next, and then we've got Tulsi after Tom. Any Tulsi fans in the house? Yeah! Oh my God! See, I apologize, Tulsi fans. The Yang Gang were up front, but of course the Tulsi fans are you guys are generous, you're kind. Aloha! Tulsi 2020. Where are you guys from? All right. Did anyone fly from Hawaii? No. Just Congresswoman Gabbard. Let's see. I'm going to come back in the audience here. I'm going to find some people. Oh, here we go. Here we go. We've got someone. I'm going to crawl over this family. I apologize, team. All right. This guy's fired up here. How old are you? You look like you're 12.
17.
17?
17.
All right. How are you feeling about this? Is this your first presidential forum?
Yeah, I'm excited. I came here to see Andrew Yang. I really liked the way he presented his ideas.
And are you going to vote for him?
Next year I'll be able to vote, so I'm heavily considering him.
I like it. And where are you from?
Kennedy High School in the Palma.
All right. Kennedy High School. So as a young person, what do you want to hear from the candidates?
What I'm concerned about for me is the cost of tuition for colleges, potentially what they want to do about climate change, and what their overall economic plan is for the future as someone who's going to be in the workforce in a couple of years.
And what do you want to be when you grow? You're good at this. What do you could take my job? What do you want to be when you grow up?
I'm planning on majoring in business. Yeah.
All right. Well, Tom Steyer's your guy. He's a business guy. Have you heard about Tom?
Yes, I have. I'm not sure what his background is, but I've heard of him before.
Awesome. And your name? What's your name again?
Nick.
Give Nick a huge round of applause. Future voter. First forum. I don't want to be biased on doing just youth voters. Maybe some older voters. I see a beautiful couple here. Hi, guys. How are you guys enjoying this? I'm going to sit next to you guys.
We're enjoying it, but we're afraid we're going to run out of time because it's taking a whole long time to get these candidates on here.
I know.
We want to hear them all.
Me too. It's like herding cats, these candidates. There's so many of them. You mix them all up with the names. Where are you guys from?
Here.
From here, okay.
Newport Beach.
And which candidate were you most excited to hear from today?
We wanted to hear from all of them. We are undecided as yet, but
Great.
we want more information. We want some substantive information from each of them.
Yeah, I thought Andrew was great.
Great, there we go. What issue do you feel like maybe was not addressed in the first interview that you'd like to hear in the next two?
I want to hear gun control.
Yes.
I know Tom is a real...
Yes.
We've got to do something about that.
Yes. Okay, great. Who else? I think I got the 3-minute mark. Guys, look, this is your chance to shine. This is history. We're making history. Here we go. Oh, we got it. Oh, we're gonna get. Okay, we're gonna get the Tulsi. We're gonna get the Tulsi crew right before Tulsi comes out. How about that? Is that cool?
Hi.
Hi. Where are you from?
I'm from around here, Artesia, Cerritos area. I go to school in Whittier College, though.
Awesome. And have you voted yet?
Yes, I have.
When did you first vote? Was it last cycle?
Yeah, it was during the midterm elections. I believe that was my first time.
And of the candidates today, who are you most fired up to see?
I just wanted to have an open mind. Yeah, and just see all of them. Definitely. As a native Hawaiian, I definitely want to see what Tulsi Gabbard has.
Yep. Team Tulsi in the house, the spirit of aloha. What's your name again?
My name is Kealohi Minami.
Beautiful. Give her a huge round of applause. All right. Ooh, I'm sorry. You guys snuck behind me. All right, some Yang Gang peeps are back. We got the math hats. They're back. We were concerned you left us forever. Excuse me. All right, well, we're going to bring Tom Steyer out in just a second. And a short story, speaking of stories, in a former life, I used to work for Tom Steyer. Isn't that weird? Yeah, I used to work in finance. I was working in finance in New York. And then my wife got into Stanford Law School, so we moved to California. And when we moved out there, I got a job working for a trading desk at this investment firm called Farallon. And that's when I drank the Obama Kool-Aid super hard and started volunteering. And I became one of the most active volunteers in the Bay Area. And when they eventually invited me to go work on the campaign in Chicago, I had to quit my job and move to Chicago. And my wife and I had just gotten married. It was a very big decision for me. And we made the decision. I quit my job. And Tom, who is a legendary investor, billionaire, head of this fund, had lunch with me on my last day. I was 25 years old. I was just a kid. And Tom had lunch, and he told me that this is the best decision I will ever make in my life. And it was a very sweet thing that Tom did for me. So anyway, so it's very cool that I now get to introduce Tom to you guys. So without further ado, the man, Tom Steyer.
Okay. Hey, Brad. Hey.
Here we go. Stand by, everybody. We're going to do this. I'll do the offstage amounts. Here we go. Ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Democratic presidential candidate Tom Steyer, accompanied by Esther Lee, Richard Louie, and Viet Nguyen.
Can we sit here?
Yep, that's where you go. All right, welcome back, everybody, for a conversation with Tom Steyer. We're thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, what a morning.
Good morning.
What a morning.
Great to be in Southern California. I live in Northern California. It's great to be down here.
So, even as we're speaking, headlines are rolling out that you have qualified for the next debate, the October debate.
Yes, I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How are you feeling?
You know, honestly, I'm very happy about it, and it's necessary to do. I started about 7 weeks ago, and they haven't run a poll in the states where I've been spending time for 5 weeks. So we were just waiting for someone to run a poll, which CBS News finally announced this morning. And we thought that if they did, I would qualify, and I did qualify. So I'm excited about it. But I think it's a long journey, you guys, and I'm incredibly excited about it. I'm not at all downhearted. It is really, really important and interesting, and I'm actually extremely energized, both by this, but I just came from New Hampshire, so traveling around the United States and learning what people think and see how they're different from Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Jose and the Valley and San Diego is really,
and New
you
Hampshire
learn
was,
stuff.
was energized, certainly. At least on TV it looked that way. Let's bring you back down to our community, the AAPI community, for a moment. And you might know this, one of the thematics is we like family, much like food, and we can talk about that later. Who in your family has influenced the way you see the world?
Okay. So I am aware that sometimes when I listen to myself being described in the press, it seems like my first name is billionaire. And so I really like a chance to talk about my family. My mother was from Minnesota, and she taught in the public schools in New York City and in the Brooklyn House of Detention. My father He and his brother and sister were the first generation of their family to go to college. He was a lawyer. He interrupted his law career to go into the Navy in World War II, and he prosecuted the Nazis at Nuremberg. There is a sense from them, but also from my brothers and from my wife, that the point of life is about doing the right thing, leaving things better, standing up for justice. And so, as someone who's, I look to my parents who are incredibly honest, hardworking, education-oriented, the kind of family that I thought everybody had when I was growing up.
Who's the most influential woman in your life?
My mom. Look, my mom, when she graduated from college, her father, who was a professor, a medical professor, told her, if you move to New York, I will never speak to you again. She moved to New York. She was when she was a journalist right out of college, she produced the NBC Evening News. She went to the head of NBC and said, I have 7 men working for me who get paid more than me. How's that possible? In like 1954. And he said, Marnie, they have families. It was just completely understood. The women in my life have always been extremely strong leaders and extremely strong in terms of value-driven choices in life. And my mom was one of them. My wife is one of them. My first 3 partners in business were all women.
Those of us who are parents know that it's a big challenge to pass on values to our children. It's always a challenge for everybody. But I'm sorry to bring it up, but as a billionaire, it must be an additional challenge as well. How do you, given the way you've described your family dynamic and how you've been raised and how you admire and respect your parents and their values, how do you transmit those values onto your own children when their situation is fundamentally different than how you grew up?
Well, when I was growing up, my parents had a very straightforward relationship with us about what was expected. They said, we expect you to study really hard in school. And in return, we'll make it possible for you to go to really great schools. And I went to really great schools. And they said, but when you graduate from your final school, you will not get 1 more cent from us. You are on your own. And I was completely fine with that, and I never inherited a penny from my parents. With my kids, I think a couple of things. The first thing I think about kids, I have 4 kids, 31, 29, 27, 25, and I was saying to Viet that my youngest kid goes to USC Medical School. And what I think about kids is they don't listen to what you say, but they watch you like a hawk. They're looking to see what you really, I don't think they even know they're doing it, but you look and see, do my parents tell the truth? Do they do the right thing? They ask me to do the right thing. Do they do the right thing? And so that was my attitude with my kids is they're going to watch me and see what my values are, and they're going to take those values. So actually, I don't think that the money has been a big deal in the sense that all of our kids have been serious about school, serious about work. We're serious about them being nice people. I honestly believe our 4 kids are really nice. They're all trying hard in their careers. I feel as if, a close family shows its values and transmits its values from generation to generation by how it behaves. And I feel as if, knock on wood, I think if you meet my kids, you will like me more. If you meet my wife, you will like me more. When I was first, I'll tell you one last story. When I was 18, I was going out with somebody, and my brother Jim said to me, why haven't you introduced her to our parents? And I said, I just haven't gotten around to it. And he goes, our parents are the nicest thing about you, Tom. You have a lot better chance if she meets them.
Says a lot about you.
Normally, you spoke about your parents and you spoke how they're a big inspiration to you and how they kind of propelled this journey of yours. Normally, when we say our parents motivate us, the next step is not let's become the president of the United States. Let's do something right and change some things about this nation. So how did it go from I'm inspired by my parents, I want to do something right, to okay, mom and dad?
So let me say this. I don't know. I assume I'm speaking to mostly Californians. Is that true?
Is that true?
Okay, well,
Mixed crowd.
So for Californians, you may know some of the things I've done. Look, I started a business in one room with no employees and no windows, and I built a pretty big multi-billion-dollar international business. Then my wife and I took the giving pledge to give our money away, and I started to organize for the last 10 years coalitions of Americans to take on unchecked corporate power. So the first public thing I did is I co-chaired the No on 23 campaign in 2010, which was 2 oil companies trying to roll back California's progressive energy legislation. I don't know if you guys remember, no one wanted the job of running that campaign because no one thought you could beat oil companies at the ballot box. We ran a completely different campaign. We got 70% of the vote. In 2012, I ran and I conceived of, wrote, and ran something called Prop 39, which was close a corporate tax loophole for out-of-state corporations. It's $1 billion a year. We gave the money to the public schools. In 2016, I co-chaired with unions a $2 a pack cigarette tax to stop young people from smoking. It raises $3 to $4 billion a year. We gave it to Medi-Cal. No one thought we could beat the tobacco companies. They had won 17 times in a row before we took them on. People tried to do that for 17 times. We were successful in doing it. I've done clean energy props around the country, basically saying 50% clean energy by 2030 in purple states to prove that actually clean energy is something that the people of America want and will vote for, and we've done it. So it isn't like I just came to this. I've been doing this for 10 years. I also started one of the largest grassroots political organizations in the United States. It's called Next Gen. In 2016, we registered 803,000 people in the state of California, specifically working with Asian American groups, by the way. We registered another 500,000 people outside California. In 2018, we did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history, where we took 38 Republican districts, organized them around youth. The turnout for people under 30 went from 18% in 2014 to 41% in 2018. That's the largest age cohort in America. It's the most diverse age cohort in America history. It's the most progressive, and they were voting less than 1 in 5 people. So actually the reason I'm running is I feel as if I have spent so long studying this problem and wondering why we have this broken federal government. And I think I have an answer. It's corporate money.
Tom, we love these fireside chats because we get to know each other. Shorter answer better.
Okay, Richard.
I'm a cable guy. That's what we do all the time. You got it, though, because you have so much to talk about. One of the things that is right in front of us that you have stood up in front of the microphones and in your advertisements very clearly about is this discussion and debate within your party specifically and outside the party certainly is the impeachment process and what will be decided come this week.
Right.
So on that very issue of whether it's good for the country or it's bad for the country and what you want to do, you've been pretty clear about what you want to do, but is it good for the country is what some of the critics, even within your own party, are asking.
Right. So I started the Need to Impeach movement. We've gathered more than 8 million signatures, and here's why I started it. Partly was to get the American people's voice into it, but I believe that when someone does something wrong, you have to stand up to them. And that if someone breaks the law who's rich and powerful, they have to be held to account. And I understand that it is something that is difficult and hard and could be contentious. I mean, I've read the criticisms too, Richard, just to be clear. But I believe that if you don't stand up to evil over time, then they win.
So then what do you want Jerry Nadler to do this coming week?
What I would like to have is a series of televised hearings to show the American people, to show the people sitting out there, the obstruction of justice, the corruption, the criminality of this president, so the American people can see it and decide, and so we can decide what to do. And I will say this, we've done a lot of research, and whether you're a Trump supporter or a Trump opposer, everybody says the same three things when they learn the evidence. I didn't know this. He's a liar and a cheat. If I did this, I'd be in jail. Everybody does, including Trump supporters. So all I'm trying to do is, look, my father prosecuted the Nazis at Nuremberg. When someone does something wrong, then the system is supposed to stand up for truth, justice, and the American way. That's all. And you can't figure out, I don't think you're supposed to figure out how it's going to turn out. You're supposed to stand up for what's right when the chips are down, and that's what we've been trying to do.
I have another question about wealth. I think you said I believe you said you're going to give away half of your wealth according to this giving pledge, which is fantastic. I congratulate you on that and congratulate all the billionaires who have pledged to do that. But that's a voluntary act on your part and on the part of these other people. What's the role of government in the management of inequality, wealth, extraordinary held wealth? Should we tax people like you more? How much should those taxes be? How can we redistribute that?
So let me say this. Yes, we should be taxing me more. I think that there's been a 40-year campaign to reduce the taxes on the richest Americans and on corporations that should be reversed. I actually proposed last October that we should have an asset-based tax on the top on people who have more than $30 million, 1% every year, as a way of redressing some of the inequality. But the other point about inequality, people talk about inequality. There's something besides taxes, and they have gone wrong, and I'd close all the loopholes and raise the rates. But the other thing that's gone wrong is working Americans haven't had a raise for 40 years. And my basic thesis, Richard, is that the corporations have bought our government. And the proof of it is that we have grown as a country for the last 40 years. Relative to other countries, I think we've done pretty darn well. But all the money has gone to the top. All of it. And so, to me, we're 40 years behind in terms of sharing the increased income of the United States in any kind of just or fair way. So when you talk about inequality, yes, there is a question of I do believe we should have, no loopholes, higher rates, an asset-based tax. I also want people to make more money because I think when people talk about the economy, I was in the private sector for 30 years. Politicians love to talk about the economy in terms of jobs. We have 3.7% unemployment in the United States of America. When I was going to college, they taught me that frictional unemployment, like the lowest unemployment, is 4%. So we have a lot of jobs. The problem is you can't afford to live on the jobs that you get. And so it's a question of wages. It's a question of can you afford health care? Can you afford, look, we're in California. Can you afford rent? Can you afford higher education? Those are the things that are just creaming Americans. We're employed. Unfortunately, we may have to have 2 jobs. If you look at the gig economy, I don't know how many of you guys, it's pretty well known, I think, in California, but I think they figured out Uber drivers make $5.50 an hour. And you cannot live doing that in Los Angeles, California.
How are you going to, so is it a higher minimum wage, or how are you going to get this wage increase to people?
Well, I think that there's a number of things, Viet. I do think we should have a higher minimum wage that reflects, the minimum wage has not kept up with inflation at all since 1970. But I think it's more than that. I think that there's been a 40-year campaign to take away the legal rights of working people. So part of it is to take away all the powers of organized labor so that people can't negotiate together as a group. There are 26 right-to-work states in the United States of America, which make it really hard to organize. That's such a misnomer. A lot of people, as a function of their employment, give away their right to sue their employer for breaking the law in how they treat them. So there's been a 40-year campaign to basically get all of the power into the hands of employers and corporations. And so there's going to be a lot of different things. I just think we have to get back to the idea that the Democratic Party is going to get up in the morning and work for working people, and they're going to do that until they go to bed. And they're going to fight their ass off. That's what I want to do. Look, we did 50 town halls on impeachment. I've been traveling this country for 7 years, full-time, talking to people about what they care about. Working people do not believe the Democratic Party fights for them.
So I'm thinking of the very electorate that you're addressing right now. I spoke with Bill, a truck driver in Howell, Michigan, about a month ago. And he does not feel, when he looks at many of those options he's got, that he has somebody that, hey, that's me. So, Tom, how are you, Bill, the truck driver in Howell, Michigan, and how are you going to address this separation, the gap? The gig economy, as you're saying, might be one of the issues to him.
So let me say this. For the last 10 years, what I've done is travel around this country and try to put together coalitions of ordinary American citizens to take on corporate power. That's why I was telling you about those props. That's what that was. Citizens fighting for our rights against corporations who wanted to squash us. And for 10 years, as an outsider, we've been winning.
Yeah.
So what I would say to that person is, look, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to organize American citizens to take back our government, our broken government, and get back to of, by, and for the people, for you. And if we don't break their power, we're not going to get the stuff we want.
But you get what I'm saying here, Tom. He might say, you got a couple dollars in your back pocket here, Mr. Steyer. You're not me. You haven't experienced what I've had to live through as a veteran, now as a truck driver, now potentially on disability. How are you like me, given that you can spend money to become a formidable candidate in this primary process? I don't see you.
Well, let me say this. I have traveled around this country and looked people in the eye. When we were doing those town halls, people said to me, you know, look, if they get rid of the ACA, I will die because I can't afford my medicine. I have had a chance to talk to people all around this country who have water that is killing their husbands, who have to decide whether to pay their child's medical bill or the rent. I've had a chance to go and understand from people what they're going through and actually spend the time with them. So my answer is, actually, I've been to Michigan and talked to those people. Have I been them? No. But as far as I'm concerned, the key point here is, do you understand who they are? Do you understand from them what they're going through? And are you willing then to take that information and fight on their behalf? And I am.
Tom, you mentioned clean energy, and you have been one of the louder voices for climate change. And personally, one of the biggest proofs that you would like to be one with the Earth is you went camping on your honeymoon.
Yes.
That is just the greatest proof to me that this is something that you are concerned about. Why should we all be concerned about this? And why is this kind of a top issue that you've been kind of driving with?
So I really appreciate that question, Esther. Let me start by saying this. I have said as part of this campaign that I will declare a climate emergency on day one of my presidency. That we're in a place, I would give Congress 100 days to pass something like the Green New Deal, but they've had 28 years to pass something like the Green New Deal, and they haven't passed anything. We're in a place scientifically where we have to act, and not only do we have to take it as an emergency here, unless you're talking about a state of emergency, unless you're going to go to the communities and understand how it impacts the places that have basically had pollution thrust on them, poor communities, low-income communities, communities of color, you're going to get the wrong policy. That's my second point. And the third is, if you're not leading internationally, it's not going to happen. Anyone who thinks that we can solve this problem in the United States of America doesn't understand this problem. If you're not talking about, and if you think we can go to India and we can go to China and say, we want you to solve the climate problem, unless we're all in to solve the climate problem ourselves, then I think you're being completely unrealistic. Look, I think, if you listen to what I said about my parents, as an American, I believe every generation's job is to pass on a better world for their kids, a chance for them to have more opportunities, to have a more meaningful life, to have a safer life, to be able to go further. We are taking a very real risk of handing on a world that's unsustainable to our children, which would be unbearable for me. And so, you know, I also can say as a business person, I've studied this for 14 years. I can tell you, we can do it and have cheaper energy. We can do it and have more jobs. We can do it and have better paid jobs. And we can do it and be healthier.
And Esther, part of your question, and excuse me, is part of, for instance, climate change. And if you talk to meteorologists, the issue of natural disasters. And California certainly has seen its set of natural disasters in recent decades. You're a Californian, you know this. We asked the other candidate the same question, and that is, okay, you are the president, President Steyer. There is a large hurricane, a Cat 5, making its way towards the East Coast. Sir, what would your first steps be as president based on the frequency of these natural disasters?
Well, let me just say that by the time a Category 5 hurricane is coming towards Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, all you can really do is try and get people out of harm's way, try and make sure that you have disaster preparedness there to help people who are in trouble, and that you're basically doing, you know, care and maintenance and resilience in the face of a disaster. But by the time you have a series of Category 5 hurricanes coming towards Miami, I mean, in effect, you've blown it. You know, there's a question here about preventing it, then there's a question about being ready for it, and then there's a question about what do you do by the time you haven't prepared for it and you're not fully ready for it. So when I think about this, Richard, to me the question is, yes, we have to be, you know, when it comes, we have to be absolutely all in to help the people who are under threat. Absolutely. Then we have to be prepared beforehand, knowing that there are going to be fires in California now. There are going to be more and bigger hurricanes on the East Coast. There is going to be sea rise. It's science. We can predict it. But more than that, we have to use a little foresight and prevent the bad things from happening. And that's what I've been trying to do for 12 years. That's why I was fighting in 2010 to have progressive energy laws in California so that our kids wouldn't have to have as many hurricanes, that we wouldn't get to a place that was really unsustainable.
Mudslides, droughts, fires.
And the biggest thing, look, there's a huge thing about climate that people don't talk about much, and that is immigration and forced movement. You know, we had 5 million people move from Syria to Europe. They actually originally went into the cities in Syria because of a gigantic drought. Then there was political injustice, and then they fled the regime. When you look at Central America, they've had a huge drought before there was political unrest, and they fled the regime. People are talking, look, 2 of the countries in the world that are most exposed going forward are China and India. They're talking about 2 billion people having to move. Can you imagine the world if 2 billion people had to, didn't have a choice, but had to move? I don't know where they'd go, but I can tell you it would be chaos.
Speaking about our own situation then, and I'm speaking as a refugee and as someone who came here under U.S. refugee policy, and now we're looking at a moment where the Trump administration is making noise about eliminating all refugee quotas or even greatly reducing them. But there are many different kinds of categories of refugees, including the climate refugees that you're talking about. So we already have this crisis at the border. What are you going to do? Are you going to open the borders? Are you going to institute quotas? What would those quotas be? How are we going to address the situation?
In terms of asylum seekers, people fleeing violence for their safety, we've agreed to laws. Asylum seekers have rights. You had a right to come here. I mean, when people come, it goes to a judge and it has to be adjudicated, and we don't have nearly enough judges, and it takes way too long. But what Mr. Trump is doing is not only inhumane against the laws of humanity, it's also against the law. And so, look, in the history of the United States, when we look back, when desperate people are coming here because they're fleeing potential murder or some form of danger in their homeland, they have a legal right to do that, and we have a legal obligation to take them. And so it's not like having an open border at all. It's basically obeying the international law. You know, I view immigration, I think we tend to squash a whole lot of questions together about people coming here into one question. look, we have 11 to 13 million people who've lived here for years or decades in some cases, who aren't documented, who live kind of in the shadows, don't have legal rights, and don't have a path to citizenship. That's a huge question that the Congress of the United States should solve and do an immigration reform and give those people legal status and a path to citizenship. And then there's a question about the people who are fleeing, or asylum seekers, and how we treat them humanely and legally. And then there's a question about how we need immigrants. The United States of America needs immigrants. We need to understand that. We don't have to open the borders. It's our country. We get to control the borders, but we should know we want people to come here. I know there are a lot of Asians coming to the United States, and that it's actually coming faster, more people coming and increasing. I think that's great. I think that's great for the United States of America, and I think it's great for those people. And so I think we've got to accept the fact that immigrants are bringing in all kinds of energy and positive work and the kinds of things that have made us, stronger for hundreds of years, and we should welcome that. We should control it. We should have rules. We don't have an open border, but that's the kind of thing. Getting great people from around the world, that's one of the secrets to why America's done great.
Well, for fun, what does Tom, what does AAPI mean?
Asian American Pacific Islander.
Okay, that's always a starting point, right?
I was like, is this a trick question?
I have asked the question before, and presidential candidates have not been able to answer
Well,
it.
Richard, let me say this. I live in San Francisco, California.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things that I always notice, and I always say this when I'm not with Asian Americans or Pacific Islanders, I always say, look, Asian Americans, those are some pretty big countries with pretty different cultures and histories. So I know that they kind of come from a joined landmass, but,
Describe the importance of the AAPI electorate.
So first of all, in California, it's huge. It is young. It is increasing due to immigration. In my mind, it has been a fantastic influence on this state for a bunch of reasons. I tend to think of Asian families as being really close. I consider that a huge boon. The reputation is that Asian families are really determined to work, that their kids be well educated. I consider that a gigantic boon. I know that in Lowell High School in my hometown of San Francisco, which is the magnet school, 83% Asian.
They kicked me out.
I told you it was a great school. I told you it was a great school. Did you go to Lowell?
Yes, and they did kick me out.
but without teasing, I mean, I was talking, if you look at the UCs, they have a ton of Asian American kids. Great.
But I'm really interested in why you think the AAPI electorate is important to your candidacy nationally.
Well, let me say this. If you listen to the things that I care about, I want an America where everybody gets the chances that I want. Mm-hmm. And it's a two-way street. We can't do this unless people get involved politically. We can't do the strong. My belief is the way that we grow as a country is that Americans succeed. So we invest in the American people, in each other. That's going to be our success. So if you want to look at a community that is working along those lines, like just let me get a good education and I will go to town. This is a community which has been a model citizen in this country. It's going to grow. Asian Americans, I don't know if you guys know this, but statistically, really big on climate, pollution, environment. This is a community which represents the values of America in a deep way. And so, from my standpoint, this is a community that wants to live and is living the American dream.
It's also a community that's not homogenous.
And that's what I was saying. It's like you can't say China, India, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Thailand, all we're one thing. It's like,
so let's pick on one issue in which there is some division. You brought up education, Lowell, for example, so you're familiar with some of this idea that Asian Americans are supposed to be very good at education. One of the flashpoints now is affirmative action.
Understood.
The majority of Asian Americans support affirmative action, but there is still some who don't. and some of them are caught up now in anti-affirmative action lawsuits, for example, at Harvard.
I know that.
What's your stance on affirmative action? And should we continue it? Should we support it? Should we change it?
Look, I think that there are communities in this country who have been severely disadvantaged and that everyone doesn't start in the same place. And I think when we think about letting people into schools, that you have to take into account where people are coming from, so that it's not if I come from a terrific educational background and here are my scores, and you come from a terrible educational background and here are your scores, they may not be comparable for what you've achieved and for what I've achieved. And I believe that. And I think that should be taken into account.
Yeah, before you and Richard answer some audience questions, I had a quick question I wanted to squeeze in.
Okay.
And the Asian AAPI voters are leaning more left, how they're voting, et cetera, how they identify, which party they identify with. But some studies indicate that religion is kind of the one factor that kind of still ignites that appeal to the GOP. You are religious. What would you say to these voters?
About me?
Or to convince them that the Democratic Party is the way to go in 2020?
Look, I think if you look at the difference between the two parties, it's a gigantic value difference, in all sincerity. I mean, I honestly believe the Republican Party has fallen off the table in terms of even trying to represent different kinds of Americans. I think this president specifically started by vilifying people on his very first trip down the escalator at Trump Tower. I think that he's someone who is specifically uses race to divide Americans. I think that his values are really, really bad. I think that he has supported racists, and I feel as if, honestly, I don't think that he's competent. So as far as I'm concerned, there is a lively discussion and a fair discussion between two parties in America. That's the moderate Democrats and the progressive Democrats. But I think I feel as if the Republicans have gone to a place, I mean, on climate, on gun control, on taxes, on coddling drug companies and health insurance companies. I think on immigration, I think they've gone to a place that is very, very radical. It's very, very un-American. And honestly, I think that they're doing a grave disservice to themselves and to everybody here. I really do.
Tom,
Richard.
Let's head on down here. We're going to walk down to the right here, talk to some folks who might have some questions. Come on by if you'd like. Since we were talking about faith, my dad's a pastor. I'm very interested.
What denomination?
I can't tell you that. Come on now. But he'd want to know how you're going to bring faith into your administration. 30 seconds.
Well, let me say this. I do believe that everybody has an obligation to try and be part of what I think of as the positive life force in the universe. I choose to do it partly by going to church, but I believe everybody has a choice of how they do it. I don't believe there's any one religion that gets you there. If you say, I have friends who say, God, great outdoors. Okay, if you find God in the great outdoors, I love you for it. My mom, when she was dying, who was very religious, said, I find God more in music than I do in church. Okay, but we all have to believe that we're contributing to the positive life force in the best way we can. That's what I believe. You get your choice of how to do it, but you got to be part of that attempt to make this country better and this world better. And we're really on the brink, so it's really up to us to show up and do that.
Thank you for that. Now I can go home and talk to mom and dad. But if I didn't answer that question, it would have been tough. Come on over. What's your name? And get in the light so they can see you, too. What's your name? And where you
Hi, my name is Hazel Herring. I live in Los Angeles.
What's your first name?
Hazel.
Hazel. Nice
Hazel
to meet you.
Herring.
And if we keep our questions fast and our answers fast, we talk to more folks.
Yes.
All right. So I heard you talk a little bit about increasing minimum wage, and you probably know in Los Angeles we've already voted on a $15 minimum wage. So on July 1st, I work minimum wage at a corporate retailer, and minimum wage went from $13.25 to $14.25, and I went from working about 40 hours a week to less than 20 hours a week. And this was something that happened to almost all of my coworkers too. And I can only imagine that that is harder for smaller businesses that are working, at the margin. And I wanted to know if you have a plan to address this.
Great. Thank you, Hazel.
Look, the issue for everybody on minimum wage is that somehow jobs are going to disappear. And specifically, people worry about it in retail. But actually, I do believe that we have an obligation that the jobs pay people enough to live on. 14 and a quarter in LA at $40 a week still isn't really a living wage. I know that. And so the question is going to be, should we be, what can we do to help the companies that can't survive on that is really the question. And to me, the question is, if you can't pay someone 14 and a quarter, if you have to go from 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week because the price went from 14 and a quarter to 13 and a quarter, wow, you have a troubled business, because every other retailer is paying the exact same wages per hour because it's now mandated. So the real issue you have is, why is it that that's driving you out of business? Because I'll say one last thing quick so Richard won't get mad at me. Normally, wages aren't the things that drive people out of business. It's an actual business model that isn't working, and that's what they blame. My experience is wages honestly have a lot more elasticity than owners like to say. That sounds like a troubled business, not a troubled.
Thanks, Hazel. Thank you so much. Come up to Soleil.
Hey.
Nice to meet you, sir.
And what is your name and where you're from?
Ryan from Chicago.
Yep.
I came for Andrew Yang. I'm glad I stayed for dessert. How are you going to bridge the Democratic Party? I think there's two parties. There's the moderate and the extreme. How can you bridge those?
So that's a great question. Thank you. Look, I am a progressive. If you look at my policies, you'll see I am progressive. I am also a 30-year capitalist. I believe that the democracy is supposed to be run by the people, for the people. Period. And I believe that corporations have successfully bought that democracy. But I believe that the private enterprise system is how we get things done in this country, and I don't want to change that. I want the government to set the rules for how business works, period, not business set the rules for how government lets them work. So I believe as a progressive, I believe I automatically do, based on my background, put those two together, and I believe that I can take on Mr. Trump on the economy because he's a fake and a fraud, and explain why that's true. And I believe that business people around the country, even though they know that I'm not going to let them keep doing the stuff they've been getting away with, will ultimately understand that I understand private sector is necessary.
How about on the social side?
I'm sorry, I know I'm going to get two more in.
Hi, Tom.
15 seconds. Where you're from? What's your question?
Louisa Blue. It's been a long time since
I
I've
know.
seen you, Tom.
Where you from?
Northern California.
What's your quick question? 15
So
seconds.
my question is, what are you going to do to change the labor laws to make sure that workers have rights to join a union without harassment, intimidation, and getting fired by
Okay, hold that
bosses?
question, Tom. You got two questions. You got to answer them both at the same time. Where you're from? Your name?
I'm from Irvine, and my name is Anupama.
And 15 seconds for your question.
So my question is that we are talking about, all the security within America, but what about all the danger that we are having with foreign countries, infiltrating our technologies and our security of the country? And I think that is
Cyber
huge.
warfare. Cyber
So
warfare.
how are you going to fix that?
Okay,
And
so
if you can do it in 60 seconds, I know you got to
Are
get
you
out of
doing
here.
union
Yes,
first?
please, go ahead.
So let me say, on every one of the propositions that I've worked on, organized labor has been my first partner.
That's right.
They've been my best partner. I understand that we need to change a lot of laws. We have to give people the right to organize everywhere in the United States. And that is something that I will never walk away from organized labor. I believe that it's important for working people to be represented, and I would do everything I can to get rid of right to work laws and every other one of those laws. Period, the end. Promise. Cybersecurity. Look, we're in California. We know that the 21st century wars are not going to be like the 20th century wars or the 19th century wars. No one is going to come and shell Washington, D.C. from their gunboats, okay? But they are going to attack us through cybersecurity. We need to spend the money on it. We need to be prepared. The reason, and we need to hold people accountable. Look, this is warfare in the 21st century. Cyber warfare. We are behind where we should be. We're not spending the money we should be spending, and we should absolutely be dominating this. We're in California. We have the capability here to do all the things we need to do in terms of information technology. We're the leading information technology economy in the world right here in this state. We need to spend the money and hire the people to make sure that we actually have the advantage in cybersecurity that we have in airplanes, missiles, nuclear technology, gunboats.
Thank you all for your questions. Thank you. Thank you. And she even got a hug. How about that for a question? All right. Tom, we're going to walk you back up to the stage for your closing statements. Thank you for taking the questions from all those who came here today. Tom Steyer, ladies and gentlemen, with his closing message.
Ready?
Please.
So let me say this. I have said that I think we have two real challenges, and they're real, but they're simple. One is to break this corporate stranglehold on our government that I believe is basically broken the federal government, and we need to get back to government of, by, and for the people. And I believe I've been working on that for 10 years as an outsider and succeeding. The second thing is we need to stabilize the natural world. The climate threat is very real. We need to do it in the United States immediately. We need to lead the world to make it happen. But let me say this. Those are really straightforward but hard tasks. If we do that, those two things, we are in a better position than any people in the history of the planet. We can have a better guaranteed lifestyle in the United States for every citizen than any country has ever provided, ever. We can have guaranteed affordable health care for every American. We can talk, and I could talk at length about how to do it. We can guarantee quality education from pre-K through college for every American. We can guarantee a living wage, and we can guarantee clean air and clean water as a right for every American. We are rich enough to do this. We have more than enough money to do those things. We have the technology to do that. We have a political system that's broken. If we get rid of the corporate influence on our government, the corporate control of our government, we will get all those things because Americans want those things. And that's not broken down between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans want those things too. So when I think about what's going on in the United States this year, I feel as if we need to establish together what it is we're trying to do. Because Mr. Trump would never have gotten elected if people thought the Democratic Party was doing its job. You know, when I go around the United States, people do not understand what we stand for. We are working off a vision from Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal. And we need to update that vision to the 21st century. But if we do that, let me say, as someone who is a grassroots organizer, who's built a big grassroots operation, we are going to have a gigantic, broad victory in 2020. I mean, we need to beat Mr. Trump. I understand that's job one. But that isn't nearly enough. You know, we are going to have to win across the board, and then we're going to have to put in some structural changes, including term limits in Congress. You know, if we had term limits in Congress, we would not be sitting here worried about Moscow Mitch McConnell. We would not be worried about Leningrad Lindsey Graham. We would basically, we are going to have to change this country the better. And this is going to be the election. This is going to be the election for our lifetime. And the way that, everyone says that a lot, but the way that I'll prove it to you is the turnout will be off the charts. They are going to show up like crazy. The question is, are we going to show up like crazy? The way that we win is by doing what Next Gen America did in 2018, which is getting the 50% of Americans who don't vote to believe the system can work and matters. And if we do that and they show up, we will win across the board. And that's actually what we need to do. We need a mandate for change in this country from the people of this country. So I would say to you guys sitting in this audience, by definition, if you're here on a Sunday, you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be here. But what we're going to have to do is show up, meaning we're going to have to organize, we're going to have to be in our communities, we're going to have to do work, we're going to have to show up, we're going to have to turn out, which means we're going to have an absolute burst of awareness from Americans and a need to make a good choice, and then we're going to need to win big. And I guarantee you that we can do that. I am asking people to support me. I'm asking you to support me. I believe that if we do this, we will create a better America than anyone can imagine. I believe that we will put behind us the kind of divisiveness and hatred that Mr. Trump represents. And I believe we will go back to leading the world, not just economically, because we'll do that, not just technologically, because we'll do that, but also morally. This is a country that was built on a moral idea. It was very imperfect. We've come a long way. But actually, we need to go back to the idea of that in the United States, we stand for something. Our foreign relations stand for something. We are value-driven, and part of that value is accepting the full humanity of every other American. Thank you. Richard.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out.
Esther, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I want to come on your show because you're going to teach me how to talk on TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a 20-minute intermission. We will now have a 20-minute intermission. The program will resume at about 12:05. Thank you. Or 1:05. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will resume in 10 minutes. The program will resume in 10 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will resume shortly.